Hello and welcome to another edition of Moments in the Bible. I'm your host, David Church. Go ahead and get turned over to 2 Kings chapter 5. 2 Kings chapter 5. I do apologize I did not get this out on Tuesday. I just had some crazy things come up that day that prevented me from getting that accomplished. And I was going to try Wednesday, but I also wanted to make sure I made it to midweek Bible study. And so I will endeavor to have it done on time next week. Of course, Saturday is our fallback day. It's a great day. It's a beautiful day. And I'm really loving it. I'm looking out the window right now and see all the leaves falling. It's very pretty out here. So 2 Kings chapter 5, the Bible says, it's starting in verse 1. Now Naaman, captain of the host of the king of Syria, was a great man with his master and honorable, because by him the Lord had given deliverance unto Syria. He was also a mighty man in valor, but he was a leper. And the Syrians had gone out by companies and had brought away captive out of the land of Israel a little maid, and she waited on Naaman's wife. And she said unto her mistress, Would God my Lord were with the prophet that is in Samaria, for he would recover him of his leprosy. And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is of the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go, and I will send a letter unto the king of Israel. And he departed, and took with him 10 talents of silver, and 6,000 pieces of gold, and 10 changes of raiment. So we're going to skip down in a minute, but just to kind of bridge the gap, Naaman goes. He gets to where he's going. He doesn't get to see Elisha. Elisha sends a messenger out instead, and the messenger says, Hey, here's what you need to do. You need to go over to the Jordan River. You need to dip 7 times, and you'll be cured of your leprosy. All right, let's pick it up again in verse 11. But Naaman was wroth and went away and said, Behold, I thought he will surely come out to me and stand and call on the name of the Lord his God and strike his hand over the place and recover the leper. Are not Abana and Pharpar, rivers of Damascus, better than all the waters of Israel? May I not wash in them and be clean? So he turned and went away in rage. And his servants came near and spake unto him and said, My father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great thing, wouldest thou not have done it? How much rather than when he said to thee, Wash and be clean? Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God, and his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. Now, this passage is just so interesting to me for so many reasons. I cannot even begin to tell you. There's just tons here. There's tons in most parts of the Bible. There's tons in all the Bible. It's just a question of can we see it? And God often reveals it to us incrementally because our limited capacity can only handle so much. But what we're going to focus on for our moment in the Bible is the fact that the people in authority listened to the people who were subject unto them, the people who they had authority over. I mean, realistically, we're talking slaves. And again, no human ever should be anyone's property, ever. And in this effect, they really did not have any standing to say anything about what they should do. But the interesting thing is, if we go back to the first 5 verses, when it talks about how the army of Syria captured this young, a little maid, we often assume that she's young. But think about this: it says that she's little, not young. It could just be a short woman. I don't know. But here's this captive, prisoner of war, if you will, who has been brought into Naaman's household. She is serving his wife, and literally she just says to her, Hey, I wish that we were in Samaria, because there's this prophet there, and I know that if Naaman would just go see this prophet, that he'd be healed. And what I find is interesting is this. In verse 4 it says, And one went in and told his Lord, saying, Thus and thus said the maid that is in the land of Israel. And the king of Syria said, Go to. And it's interesting because at first I thought, and this still may be, that someone overheard the maid talking to his wife, or she may have even instructed this servant and said, Hey, go tell Naaman. But I don't necessarily know that that's what it means. I actually think that it was the king. And the reason I think that is because it says, and one went in and told his Lord, And then it says, and the king of Syria said, go to. Go. In other words, if he had told Naaman, aren't we missing the part where Naaman went and said, hey, king, do you think I might want to go check this out? No, I actually think that what happened is that somebody went and told the king, hey, this general who you like so well, there is this little maid who we took captive who says that there's a prophet over in Israel that can heal him. Now, this is so significant because, again, when you think about this, in warfare, especially back in those days, whoever won, your God was stronger. That's how it was thought. Of course your God was stronger. It was the gods of Egypt versus Jehovah. It was Dagon versus Jehovah. Whoever won, their God was stronger. That's the reason that Hananiah, Mishael, Azariah, and Daniel were all given names like Belteshazzar, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Their names all meant something about Jehovah, and then their names were changed to something about the other gods. So for this king to hear from a captured slave, a prisoner of war, that this other god in this other land has a prophet who can heal him is remarkable. It's remarkable because he listened to a servant who listened to a slave. It's also remarkable because he had enough humility to go, hey, what I'm doing isn't working. I can't heal this guy. I can't help him. Our gods aren't doing anything. What kind of humility does it take for a king to listen to a servant who listened to a slave? That is incredible. And you know what? That humility was infectious. Because when we go down further and we get down to verse 11 and 12 where Naaman is angry, he is ticked off. Man, he thought that there was going to be this big display that Elisha was going to come stand in the door and go, behold, thou art healed. Boom! And I don't know, maybe do one of those, smack him in the forehead. It says strike his hand over the place. It doesn't mean that he would hit him, literally that he would pass his hand quickly over and just like, it would be done. And he's like, nah, go wash in the filthy river Jordan. And he is ticked off about it. And what happens? Verse 13, and his servants came near and spake unto him and said, my father, if the prophet had bid thee do some great things, wouldst thou not have done it? How much rather then when he saith thee, wash and be clean? Now again, this guy's in rage. It says right at the end of verse 12, so he turned and went away in rage. He's angry. These servants have the guts to come up to him and in a very respectful way go, hey, have you considered this? I know you're mad, but there's a solution right here. They cared enough about him to risk that. And does he just continue in his rage and go, shut up, what do you know? No. Verse 14, it said he didn't say anything. Then went he down and dipped himself 7 times in Jordan, according to the saying of the man of God. And his flesh came again like unto the flesh of a little child, and he was clean. That's what the Bible says happened. Why? This whole thing happened because a king was humble enough to listen to his servant, who was humble enough to listen to a slave. And then Naaman, taking that example, was humble enough to listen to his servants. Don't have to. When we have authority in our lives, when we're in a position of authority, whether it be in our homes, whether it be in a church, at work, in a government capacity, whatever it is, we may say, hey man, I'm the one in charge. I make the decisions here. You are a peon. Shut up. Well, we can do that if we want to. But I got to ask you, is what you're doing working for you right now? Is it really accomplishing the mission? It wasn't accomplishing the mission in the king's eyes of Syria. It wasn't accomplishing the mission in Naaman's life. Have a little humility. The people that God places in our lives as subordinates, and again, there shouldn't be slaves. we shouldn't be having slaves. If you have slaves, I need to make a call. Just let me know. But seriously, the people that God has placed where we are responsible for them, it's not a one-way relationship only. They can contribute to us. The Bible says that knowledge puffeth up. And we may say, hey man, I know more than they know. Yeah, but one thing you know about knowledge is the more you know you don't know. And every single person can build into our lives. So why don't we have the humility that whenever someone from below us comes up and says, hey, I got an idea. Let's listen and see if it might be a better idea than what we've been going off of. That's what happened in the first part with the king. Or maybe that someone comes up to us and says, hey, maybe you ought to rethink that strategy, bro. That we would have enough humility to be like, yeah, I'm being proud and I need to be redirected. because the truth is that we can learn from anybody. And by the way, this is a perfect example of leadership flowing both directions. Leadership doesn't just go down, it can also go up. These servants led up. And look what God, Jehovah, was able to do. Because after this, Naaman becomes completely dedicated to serving Jehovah. All because he had the humility to follow the example of his king and listen to the people that he was over. May we do the same. Thank you so much for joining us on Moments in the Bible. We appreciate you with us. If you haven't subscribed, please go ahead and take a moment to do so. We'll see you next week. God bless.